Member from Toronto Danforth.
Thank you, Speaker. To the Premier, yesterday in a self-congratulatory press conference, the Minister of Energy touted the Liberal government's short-sighted decision to sell off yet another batch of Hydro One shares. What he neglected to mention, though, was that the further privatization of our hydro system will ensure that hydro bills for everyday Ontario families will continue to climb. Why are the Premier and her Minister of Energy so excited that families who are already struggling will be left further behind?
Thank you, Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I know that the member of the third party understands that building infrastructure in this province is important. He lives in an urban riding, Mr. Speaker. He represents an urban riding that needs those investments, Mr. Speaker. And in fact, we continue to make investments in transit, in
Finish, please, Premier.
Mr. Speaker, that the net proceeds will be reinvested in new infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, and I know he supports investing in infrastructure. So, Mr. Speaker, we made a decision to maximize the value of our assets in order to make those critical new infrastructure investments. We are going to continue to do that, Mr.
Thank
Speaker.
You. Supplementary.
Thank you again to the Premier. The loss of the province's majority stake in Hydro One will cost Ontarians dearly. People's hydro bills will keep going up.
Member from Beaches, East York.
And they will lose out on the services that revenue from Hydro One used to pay for. Our hospitals, schools, long-term care homes are already at a tipping point because of Liberal cuts. The sell-off will make the situation even worse. How can the Premier justify this boondoggle for Bay Street investors at the expense of the people of Ontario?
Thank you. Premier, thank you. Minister of Energy. Please. Thank you. Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, pleased to rise to talk about what we're doing to continue to make rates affordable for all Ontarians across the province, Mr. Speaker. The Ontario Fair Hydro Plan has already reduced rates by 17%. They've seen that by
Carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, I'll repeat, rates have dropped down as of May 1st, down by 17% compared to last year, and by July 1st of this year, Mr. Speaker, if passed through the legislation, we will see an additional 8%, bringing that total on average to 25%. But, you know, Mr. Speaker, the media know, I know the opposition know, the official opposition know that rates are set by the OEB. It's too bad that the third party doesn't understand that component.
Thank you. Final supplementary.
Well, clearly the minister doesn't know how energy works in this province. Speaker, the Premier has no mandate to sell off Hydro One. It will hurt everyday families. It will put further strain on our public services. She knows that 80% of Ontarians oppose this sell-off, and yet she insists on moving forward. Why is the Premier allowing already wealthy Bay Street investors to get filthy rich off the backs of ordinary Ontario families?
Thank you. Be seated, please. Be seated, please. Thank you. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's not just this party that, understands how the electricity system works, Mr. Speaker. We've been working hard with stakeholders throughout the province to come forward with a fair hydro plan that's going to reduce rates by 25%. And I know the opposition, the third party, Mr. Speaker, can't understand how the OEB applies the rates. They can go to their website. It's explained there very clearly, Mr. Speaker. But the criticism, what's interesting, Mr. Speaker, of their obsession with Hydro One, Mr. Speaker, is even more harsh from Tim Kildass of the Globe and Mail. Calls the belief that ownership of utilities in Ontario affecting rates one of the biggest misconceptions about electricity. Even Brady Yosh, an economist of the Consumer Policy Institute and frequent government critic, calls the idea of privatization increases rates as a straw man, Mr. Speaker. You know what? When it comes to doing right for the people of Ontario, we're building infrastructure, we're building the hospitals, we're building the schools because we have a plan to build Ontario up, unlike the opposition parties, Mr. Speaker.